Okay, guys, hi. It's July and it's another update from the Haye Sainte uh, battlefield. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about the French cavalry attack that I'm depicting here. And then we'll have a quick look at the units I've put together in more detail. Well, I'll then do a quick update on what I've completed elsewhere on the model. So what we're going to talk today about is the French cavalry. Now, we'll just talk generally about cavalry units, the British cavalry in particular, and the French cavalry, a quick comparison. The French cavalry was pretty much the cream of Europe, very experienced and very disciplined. In comparison, the British cavalry was well equipped, probably equipped and trained to the same extent. However, as Wellington said, they were reckless and he couldn't really trust them and relied very much on the steadiness of his infantry. As far as mounts go, however, though, the British cavalry had far superior mounts, and the cream of the French horses pretty much having been lost in Napoleon's disastrous Russian campaign, to the extent that a lot of the colourings for the regiments, being black horses, for example, the Grenadiers of the Guard, all black horses with no white socks, pretty much disappeared, and they were mounted on whatever they could get their hands on. So we'll talk now on the ground itself. As you know, there'd been torrential rain the night before, and Napoleon delayed his attack on the Allied position, hoping that the ground would dry. The ground was still very muddy, okay, and it was uphill. So unlike armour of today, in mud it just slows down, but a tank or track vehicle will keep going till it runs out of fuel. Horses, however, very quickly will become exhausted in that sort of ground. And actually on the day, by the time the French got to the ridgeline, the horses were pretty much blown. And the actual momentum of the charge had been lost, and it was pretty much a trot by the time it got to the guns. Okay. So what we're looking at here is at 15:30 in the afternoon, Napoleon ordered Ney to attack and seize Wellington's centre, in particular the key point of La Haye Sainte, defended by the various elements of the King's German Legion. He initially did this with 2 brigades of infantry, and this attack commenced at 3:30 p.m. It was repulsed. However, during this attack, Ney, a cavalryman by trade, saw what he thought was the British army retreating. Now, doctrine of the day was to encompass an all-arms attack, i.e. use of artillery to pound the enemy, and then use infantry to support a cavalry attack with horse artillery in support, and it could deploy forward to cover the cavalry. Ney, however, was not a good strategist, but he was an experienced soldier, but he was impetuous, and he decided to launch an assault on what he thought was a British retreat. Initially, he mustered 2 brigades of cuirassiers, about 5,000 horse, and charged Wellington's line along a front of about 1,000 yards. And they went thundering up the hill, over the sunken road, and were engaged by various elements of the British artillery. And when they got to the top of the rise, they were met by solid checkerboard infantry in squares. We'll just talk a little bit about the sunken road. A lot of misconceptions about this sunken road. The French, in particular, like to make it out as a very high ditch, of which their horse literally fell into, and a lot of them were incapacitated. All I'll say on this is that throughout the day, British cavalry units were able to cross it, particularly in the charges of the Union Brigade and the Guards cavalry squadrons, without much hampering. So the initial attack failed, and what happened was, obviously, as you know, squares were formed, front rank kneeling, 2 or 3 ranks depending on how decimated the unit was, but a horse will not charge a solid wall of steel bayonets. So in effect what you had was the French cavalry milling around using pistols and carbines at fairly close range, but pretty much ineffectual. The odd one would go forward and try and clash with the infantry, but pretty much they were unhorsed by platoon fire, so firing by platoons. In all, there were some 12 cavalry attacks that day, and initially it was, like I said, it was cuirassiers, but pretty much Napoleon then reinforced disaster by committing light cavalry brigades and also his guard brigades, which effectively meant that in all that was about 10 to 8,000 horse, about 40 squadrons. The disastrous effect of that was they pretty much were taken out of the equation for later use in the day. Particularly, for example, the chasseurs à cheval, you can just make them out over there. They were used to supporting the guard in an attack. But as a result of the use in these cavalry charges, they were unable to support the guard in the final assault on the line. So the final attack went in about 1730 and pretty much was over at 1800 hours. And that was the French cavalry as a formation taken out of the equation. And that's what we're depicting here, because at about 1800 hours, that's when the French infantry finally do their final assault and take La Haye Sainte, because the KGL and Nassers had run out of ammunition. We've talked about that before. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to home in here and have a look at some of the characters. So from the left, this is what I've done is I've staggered it. I'm showing that sort of final desperate charge, and you've got the front elements and then some elements behind. So from the left, we've got some line lancers there, of Jacquinot's line lancers, who engage the Union Brigade, and they're taking fire, as you can see, the casualties from the King's German Legion in La Haye Sainte. Coming right, then we have Emperor's Dragoons of the Guard, and then we have Grenadiers à Cheval of the Guard. Moving further on right, then you have Ney and his ADC, the bugle major there, who's been hit by canister. He's a conversion from an RHA driver with a whip. And behind them, then you have the 5th Cuirassiers. Moving further right, you have the Dutch Lancers with their distinctive orangey red tunics. And you can see there the trumpet major there in his busby. They've crossed the line of guns. You've got the 1st Carbineers there. And then you have I think it's the 2nd Dragoons, yellow facings. Just pan back a bit there. And they're obviously approaching the sunken road and being engaged there by RHA firing canister. Coming back then, we have Hussars to the left. I think they're the 5th Hussars off the top of my head. And then Chasseurs à Cheval. Okay, couple of explosions then. Now the spotters amongst you will say, well, why explosions? Because artillery fired ball or shrapnel. However, and the French fired canister. However, there were howitzers present and they fired shell. And what you're seeing there is a hollow ball with explosive charge and 2 of those exploding there to effect, with casualties being taken by the French. Final line, we have the Polish Lancers, of which there was a squadron that accompanied Napoleon from Elba. You have another Cuirassier squadron there, the 10th. Some chasseurs, dragoons, and more line lancers. So there we go. I'll just pan back, let you have a look at that, and we'll take you from a side view. Also, what I'll show you is, now we've got a bit more better light, is elements of the French cavalry attacking the squares on the ridge. You've got the 93rd Highlanders there with Wellington talking to one of his staff officers. Glorious Gloucesters, and there you'll see them, the French there, milling around, firing pistols and carbines into the infantry. Enniskillens with some 93rd protecting the guns, and over in the corner there we have Dutch Nassau's with British squadron, mix and match of cavalry counter-attacking. So what have I done? Well, there's a bit more groundwork being done, so more casualties. Okay, and we'll just have a quick pan of that. So there you go. This is obviously depicting De Leon's initial assault and then repulsed. So we've got Highlanders, Camerons, various British Guard infantry, Enniskillens, Greys, and then we're moving up to, like I said, a horse battery there coming forward to provide support. Also done more groundwork over the Dutch and Nassau's. A little bit more work in the corner. There's a cuirassier there being engaged by a Dutch Hussar. Okay, that's the latest there. That's the an RHA gun firing shrapnel, close range, and the associated casualties. That's pretty much it, guys. I'll just be quiet now and give you a quick pan round, and hope you enjoyed it. Next update, we'll be talking about the various units in the squares. Oh, I meant to mention there, I also added to this battalion coming onto the field, I added some voltigeurs out front there, casualties falling back, voltigeurs in the front, and then obviously the remaining elements, fusiliers, voltigeurs and grenadiers coming on. And they're approaching the orchard. Okay guys, that's it from me. Enjoy.